The narcissist is not obsessed with the empath because of love, but because in that person's gaze, for one rare moment in their life, they caught a glimpse of their true self, and from that moment on, they could no longer escape what they had seen. There is a truth very few people understand when they come out of a relationship with a narcissist. What haunts them is not always you, but the feeling they once had while standing in your gaze. They may leave. They may find someone new. They may speak of you with coldness, bitterness, even as if you never meant anything at all. But somehow, they still linger around your life like a shadow that refuses to disappear. Still watching, still probing, still trying to reach you through some signal, as if they cannot truly let go. At a superficial glance, people might call that longing, regret, or some twisted form of love that never fully ended. But no, the thing keeping them stuck is not love. It is something deeper, darker, and far more frightening, an obsession with reflection. The empath does not only make the narcissist feel loved, the empath makes them feel seen, not the mask they built to gain admiration, control, and power. But the part buried far beneath it, the part that trembles, lacks, feels shame, hungers for love, yet does not dare live honestly with itself. And that is where the paradox begins. The empath does not love strategically. They love through presence, through the ability to make another person feel touched without being consumed. Yet that very presence makes the narcissist tremble in a way they would never admit. Because the closer they move toward that light, the more clearly they feel the shadow within themselves taking shape. The more they are seen, the more threatened they feel. The more they are soothed, the more they hate having to need something they cannot create for themselves. So they want to hold on, control, stay close, and destroy all at once. Not because they do not need the empath, but because they need them too much, to the point that the need itself turns into rage. And from there, the whole cycle begins: the clinging, the manipulation, the pulling close and pushing away, the craving intertwined with attack, and the obsession that refuses to end even long after the relationship has outwardly fallen apart. A narcissist is not drawn to an empath merely because they are loved. They are drawn in because, for the first time, someone is not looking at them through fear, conquest, or blind admiration. The empath looks differently. That gaze passes through polish, through charisma, through the ability to control a room, and reaches something more fragile underneath. For someone who has lived too long inside a mask, that experience feels at once like salvation and exposure. That is why everything begins with a pull that feels almost impossible to explain. In the beginning, the narcissist often appears as though they have been waiting for this exact person for a very long time. They say the kinds of things that make the empath feel seen in a rare way. They come close with an intensity that makes the connection seem more than ordinary attraction. But what is moving underneath is not simple chemistry. It is the feeling of temporary inner stability in the presence of someone who still has access to their own inner world. The empath can sit with emotion without fleeing it. They can feel pain without immediately turning it into attack. They can enter depth without performance. To the narcissist, qualities like these are almost hypnotic, because they belong to regions of the psyche the narcissist has abandoned or never fully developed. In the empath's presence, they feel clearer, more alive, less inwardly chaotic, not because they have suddenly become more mature, but because the person in front of them is unconsciously performing functions they do not know how to perform for themselves. The empath listens and creates safety. They sense tiny emotional shifts and instinctively try to soothe them. They give language to feelings the narcissist avoids. They preserve connection when the narcissist wants to sever it. They lay warmth over emptiness so the narcissist can go on believing they are still intact. To the empath, this all feels like love, but within the narcissistic structure, it quickly becomes a source of psychic survival, and that is where the danger enters. The moment a person begins living off an energy they cannot generate from within, they stop knowing the difference between love and possession. They no longer move toward the empath as an independent being to meet them. They move toward them as a place to restore their sense of value. Every time they are listened to, they feel more real. Every time they are forgiven, the mask feels more secure. Every time the empath tries harder to understand, stays a little longer, keeps searching for the good in them, they receive more evidence that they can continue existing without truly changing. From here, feeling no longer flows between two equal souls. It becomes a one-sided extraction of psychic energy. The empath often senses the distortion before they can fully name it. They begin to feel tired in ways that are hard to explain. They are near the person, yet never truly resting. They feel they must keep the emotional atmosphere from collapsing. They are always trying to decipher why the other person has gone cold, silent, or distant. They keep believing that if they can just become a little deeper, a little softer, a little more understanding, everything will return to balance. But that effort is exactly what sustains the dynamic that is draining them. Every time the empath absorbs more chaos, the narcissist has less reason to develop the capacity to face themselves. Every time the empath transforms something cruel or irrational into something understandable, the narcissist's mask is pulled tighter against their face. The obsession, then, is not born from love in any healthy sense. It is born from reflection. The narcissist is not intoxicated by the empath simply because the empath is gentle, beautiful, or deep. They are intoxicated because, in that gaze, they once had the chance to see a version of themselves that felt less empty, less distorted, less estranged. The empath becomes a mirror that both reflects what they most long to believe about themselves and reveals what they most fear. Those two experiences happen at once. One makes them addicted. The other makes them panic. One tells them to come closer. The other makes them want to shatter the mirror before they must look any longer. That inner split is what creates such a strange attachment the more they need. The more they hate, needing, you can see it clearly in the pattern of pulling close and pushing away. When the empath starts to withdraw, the narcissist panics. They come back softer, more tender, saying the kinds of things that awaken the empath's hope. But when the empath gets too close, close enough to touch the distance between mask and true self, the narcissist often goes cold, vague, attacking, or chaotic. This is not random inconsistency. It is the nervous system of a defended ego that cannot tolerate genuine intimacy. Too close, and exposure threatens. Too far, and emptiness returns. So they remain trapped in a loop that never allows peace. They can only keep another person at the exact distance where they are fed, yet still protected from self-confrontation. For the empath, this kind of love tears the soul into pieces, because they can feel that beneath all the distortion there is real pain. And because they feel that pain, they stay longer, try harder, hope more. They think they are protecting love. Many times, what they are actually protecting is the other person's ability to avoid the truth. They are not the reason the narcissist fails to grow, but if they remain too long inside the role of healer, they become the shelter for that immaturity. That is the deepest tragedy here. The more sincere the empath is, the easier it becomes for the narcissist to go on living without ever becoming real. The obsession intensifies each time the empath begins to awaken, as long as they still react, still hurt, still explain. The narcissist believes the mirror remains in their hands. They are still being reflected. They still feel central inside the other person's inner world. But once the empath starts seeing the game clearly, their silence becomes the most frightening thing of all. Not because silence is punishment, but because it cuts off reflection. A narcissist can often tolerate being hated more easily than being made irrelevant. Hatred is still connection. Fear is still reaction. But calm indifference is different. It tells them that the gaze which once made them feel real is no longer fixed on them. From there, the obsession changes form. They no longer only want the empath back. They want the restoration of the version of themselves that existed while being seen through hope, depth, and faith. They may return through beautiful memories, half-formed remorse, words that sound like awakening, or even rage when they are denied access. But beneath every form, what they seek is not mature love. They are seeking the feeling of being reflected as though they were still redeemable, still deeply lovable, without truly having to change. And because no shallow relationship can recreate that feeling, the empath becomes an obsession that is nearly impossible to replace. In the end, what traps the narcissist in relation to the empath is not the loss of an ordinary relationship. What traps them is that rare moment in life when they stood before a gaze that did not fully deceive them, and did not abandon them immediately either. They were touched and exposed at the same time, soothed and called toward truth at the same time. They need that experience the way a starving person needs water, yet cannot bear the smallness, shame, and dependence it awakens. So they worship it and destroy it, cling to it and wound it, want to be saved and ruin the hand that reaches toward them. That paradox turns the entire relationship into a kind of trance, where one person keeps loving in order to heal, while the other keeps trying to possess the light so they never have to learn how to generate any of their own. And then, at some point, the empath begins to understand that what the narcissist cannot let go of is not simply them as a person. What they cannot release is the feeling of having once lived inside a gaze that made them feel as though they had a soul. For one rare moment, they stood before a light that did not merely soothe them. It made them feel deeper than the mask they had been wearing, but because they could not bear living with that truth, they chose the only method they knew: distort it, control it, and eventually destroy the very thing they needed most. That is why this story was never truly a love tragedy. It is a collision between light and shadow, between a person who still has access to their inner world and a person who survives only through the reflection of others. The narcissist does not obsess over the empath because they loved in any real sense. They obsess because they once tasted something very close to real aliveness, and then lost it through their own fear. And the empath does not suffer only because they were betrayed, but because they once used their light to keep warm, a place that never wanted to learn how to generate its own. But once that truth becomes clear, everything begins to change. The empath no longer needs to ask why they were not enough, no longer needs to decode every return, every vague signal, every trace of obsession the narcissist keeps trying to leave behind. Because by then, they can finally see it. They were never hated for loving too much. They only stood too close to someone who could not bear the truth that sincere love exposed. And perhaps that is where real freedom begins. Not when the narcissist disappears, not when they regret it, but when the empath stops serving as a mirror for someone else's ego and begins returning to being the light of their own life.